Coming up on the program, the blocks in the power supply chain are bickering while Nigerians continue to groan of epileptic supply.
The federal government wants power generation cut down to curb wastages, but distribution companies are having none of that. When will Nigerians enjoy stable power supply? We'll talk more about that when we return after the break.
Okay.
You're welcome back. Now, it's still TVC Breakfast. Now, let's also look at something else that is very critical, the power sector. Steady power supply remains a mirage in Nigeria. This is because the threefold value chain of electricity supply, the generation, transmission, as well as distribution, are all plagued with various challenges.
Yeah, now these challenges had existed long before the privatization of the power sector, a move the government at the time hoped will put an end to tales of woe told by Nigerians. But so far, companies within the sector have resorted to name-calling and blame game on why the nation has remained in darkness rather than providing solutions. Distribution companies, as you call them, discos, who directly interact with customers, say that the transmission company, that's the TCN, and the generation companies they call GENCOs, are currently responsible for their inability to perform optimally.
Discourse say that the persistent, directive from the National Control Center to GENCOs to generate below their maximum capacity is hindering their drive towards efficient power supply across the country. Let's now bring in Sheson Okunwade, public affairs analyst, to help us put all of these into bird's eye view. He's also a chartered accountant. Thank you very much indeed for coming, Sheson.
Morning.
Thank you.
Yes, good morning.
Nice to see
you. Well, you see what it is at the moment. You know, everybody shifting, you know, the blame, you know, and all of that. It is not fine at all that since the privatization of the sector, Nigerians are not better for it, are they?
You know, severally I've said this, that we don't study things before we jump into what the issues are. On one side, people actually yearn, let's privatize, government has failed us. Now it's in the hand of the private sector. There is no difference. Because
people thought what happened in the telecom industry would also, you know, happen.
I've said it here times with that number. You can't compare electricity and telecoms. They are two different sectors. You don't use, both of you work in this organization, but you don't have the same wiring. Electricity is different from telecommunication. So the process is because people don't have understanding of what power entails, and that is why you want to be likening electricity and telecoms together. They are two different things. We said it right from the GENCO to the TCN to the DISCO. As we speak, they are all struggling. And that's why you can see from your prologue that there are trade blames. The DISCO are telling, the DISCO that are blaming the GENCO and the TCN, The last time I was there, we all heard about people rejecting supply that we don't want because we can't afford to pay. As we speak, TCN keeps complaining there are a lot of outstanding on the part of the DISCO that are unable to fulfill to them, and they could not meet their liability to the GENCO. And for the GENCO, thank God, government have made life very easy to them. They have an embed account where they draw directly from whether you use the supply or not. What I want to emphasize here is that there are serious problem in the aspect of whether the TCN, the GENCO. I am particular about the DISCO. Why am I particular about them? They are the last resource that you and I need to benefit from. Number one, we've said it times with that number, the connection policy of some of these DISCOs are actually wrong. You cannot trace fault. You can, at this age, if there are faults on a particular line, it takes weeks. It takes days. Transformers are out. But you are complaining that you are not getting supply. The one that they are giving to you, how maximally are you utilizing it? So the issue is, you are our last resort. As we speak, so many people are buying transformers on their own. So many people are clamoring for meters.
So there is a sense in which the network, the transmission network has become a little bit obsolete and would need to be renewed. So
from the TCN to the distribution network, there are serious areas where you need to overhaul the system. There are a lot of, some of the equipment being used by TCN are over 4 decades. You can imagine a car that you bought, I'm sure any 40-year car cannot be used again. Discover areas where they are changing some of those things. They are not even having the right quality things to be used to replace what they are replacing. I'm not against you bringing Chinese product, but you and I know that if you go to China and you request for a standard product, I have seen in this sector where somebody is bringing in a Chinese product and a Chinese company is bringing in the product. You can't compare the quality. They are two distinct things, because it's people that will go and say, see, because we need to save cost and I need to make more margin, can you reduce some of this quality? And I will never be
so in that case, you can get the good, the bad, and the ugly from China.
Of course, it's a matter of what you actually ask them to produce for you.
Okay,
who is producing for America? It's right. China.
You talked about the issue of discos, which is the engaging point or the engagement with the people. Now, talk to us about the issue of metering, which is part of what a lot of people are saying. Before you even make a headway, there has to be a measurement, value for money, so that when you don't give me light, as I don't have light, maybe sometime for 1 week, I know I'm not paying anything. Talk to us about the challenges in metering and the costs and all of that.
The area I have with metering policy is, for me, the regulators got it wrong.
Okay.
And I think they are just retracing their step back with the new meter asset providers scheme.
How did they get it wrong in the first place?
How will you, for Christ's sake, said the instrument I'm going to use to measure your consumption, it's going to be free. The cost of this thing is enormous. And you need to pay for, it's just like, let's use the telecom they're saying, you need to buy a line. Will the telco give you the phone to make the cost? No. We ask them, the cost of getting some of these things for the distribution company is huge. It's huge and it's killing. The only way you can resolve some of this thing is by asking people, if you actually want me to measure your consumption, go ahead and procure a meter and have it. Decentralize it probably from the hands of the DISCO. There was a time there was cap mill, and what cap mill was out to do was pay, and within 45 days, they are going to install your meter. But we are the meters. These meters are not being manufactured here in Nigeria. There is nobody. The highest we've had over time is people assembling. You just put the head to the hand, make those things, but they cannot even still meet with the demand of Nigerians. So I think with what they are doing currently with this meter asset provider scheme, by making people to buy their meter, go ahead, pay for the meter. Let me tell you, if you are not paying, there are other areas you can check meter on. When we give you estimated billing, you'll be forced to get your meter. But make the meters available. And that's an area where they're going to, okay, let several people bring in. But there is an area I want them to check through, which the consumers too must look. When you open such business, be ready that you have adulterated product. There must be guarantee of which NEC has actually put in this thing. If you supply a meter to me, at least you can have meter that for the next 1 year you should not have an edit.
And the government, we know full well, has given orders to the transmission companies to provide, make meters available to consumers of electricity. Well, in 2015, about $11 billion strategy fund, if you remember, was launched to help operators within the sector so as to boost the operations and all of that. We haven't seen effect of that, have we?
You can't get effect of some of those things until we have sincere and genuine people who are passionate about what they are doing in every sector they are. Whether you put in intervention, haven't they given the governors intervention fund to pay salary? Have we seen any improvement? The fact remains that once this money are made available, people are just making, there is nobody monitoring. I'm giving you money. You know, if you work in the private sector and you need to take loan from the bank, you see how a marketer will follow you tooth and nail to make sure that what you collect the money for is what you're utilizing. If government is giving such intervention for, who monitors them? Where is the appraisal level to say, okay, I've actually given you money to solve this problem, and here we are at this level, you've not met it, you need to be penalized, this is the penalty for this. These are areas they should look. It's not just enough to say we are making available all the time intervention funds for some of those things. The truth is, people are, as we speak, the yearning for meter, it's very much okay to measure what you have. But I'll go back to areas where there are no right connection policy. Look at the cobwebs we have every year. You don't go to a civilized country and see such things being operated. If you want to trace a particular problem at a particular place, how do you trace it? You start taking one cable for the other.
You have to even shut the whole place down.
Down, so that you can easily.
So you don't
but
get
if you have a
electrocuted.
network connection, where if there's a problem, I know I'm addressing yours, I'm addressing this thing, then you can solve it. By then, when you put meter, you know what you are measuring. Do you know, even with meter, some people now, because of the cobwebs we have, you can even tap your neighbor's light. And when you tap the person's light, it will be reading on you and not the person. And the guy will be, the next, we've seen it. It's been investigated. And the next thing the guy will be saying, the meter that was supplied to me is running very fast. Nothing is running very fast. Somebody is doing something somewhere.
But that brings us to the issue of ordinary people. They wouldn't know how to do this thing. It has to do with the connivance of people who know how these things work, as the case may be.
Because no one checkmates those guys on the field. No apology to any of you. You have NEPA 4, NEPA 7, NEPA. Somebody has worked in the system. He understands the nitty-gritty of how to do some of these funny acts. Then you should go ahead. It's just like saying, you know, there are professional hackers. Will you say because there are professional hackers, you are not going to use the system? You have to look for a way to mitigate that problem. That is why we asked the DISCO to stand up and make sure that you monitor some of those things and you follow it through.
Okay, we have to leave you here now. Sheson Kwade, the chartered accountant, and you have followed this development. We hope to look for a better time again to dwell more on this as we get along. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Right. Now, just before we go, let's let you know that the views and reactions of our resource persons and the topics discussed on the program today are their views and have no connection with TVC News. Thank you very much for your understanding.
That's our disclaimer.
Yes, and stay with TVC. We certainly will be letting you know how the goings on the route, the Third Mainland Bridge is tomorrow. Certainly, we'll be here to let you know how things are. We'll be going there live tomorrow to bring you pictures, to bring you voices, to bring you hopes of how it is going there. Have a great day ahead. I am Mike Okwache.
And I am Ikuchuku. Will be and enjoy the rest of the day. Bye-bye.
All right, let's begin with the papers this morning. Headlines across newspapers in Nigeria. We have with us from the University of Lagos, senior lecturer Dr. Dan Ekere this morning. Good morning, Dr. Ekere.
Good morning.
Nice to see you.
It's always a pleasure to be here.
Don't always forget
Hi, Chief.
Absolutely.
Has become a
He's one of the kingmakers who will bestow high chief, low chief, and chief on anybody.
All right, let's take a look at the front page of the Nation newspaper. Buhari forecloses former DSS boss Dara's return. Dara sacked while seated in VP's office. Well, Dan, Dr. Dan, well, that's the story.
Yeah, well, it's quite interesting. But I think that it was one major decision that was, almost practically everybody, hailed. And I think it is something that was quite, apt as at the time it was taken. And I'm sure it will give, a very clear signal to others that there is what you call, rule, order in the system, so that you don't operate outside the rules. There are always rules of engagement in every office, and it's expected that everybody should be able to, align with those rules.
It's great.
All right, banks lending to private sector declines by 600.6 billion naira. That's the story.
Wow. But I'm even wondering really how people are are able to take these loans as they survive, because going to any of the commercial banks, yes, it's as good as being on a suicide mission, because the interest is so terrible.
Yes.
And I don't know how people manage to break even with these loans. So I'm not too surprised that in some instances you have all these bad debts that are never paid, and like what happened in time past, where banks have to, as a result of then under I think the now Emir of Kano, the kind of chase that the banks were having against their customers who could not pay. This is the kind of situation that really brings about that kind of scenario. I think we should continue to work on this issue of the interest rates.
All right, gun attack on home. Akpabio police differ. Akpabio raised alarm. His home was attacked by 10 gunmen. We're going into 2019 now, and this is a period where you begin to see attacks on opponents and all of that. Thereby bring into play Niccolo Machiavelli's political philosophy, where of course he said, look, the end justifies the means.
Yeah, but you see, I equally do believe that Niccolo need to be, perhaps we should have a wider understanding of it. The man is looking at two scenarios. When you have a situation like Nigeria, where there is some level of lawlessness and some level of impunity, and people operate with a kind of distrust, he advocated a system. And it is that system that he said the prince should be drastic, should be cunning, should be this and all of that. But for people who are sane, the man believes that you must
the point there is Machiavelli's postulations, one way or the other. Some scholars will see it as a little too drastic, a little too harsh.
That's what I'm saying. That
anti-people.
He looked at two different worlds.
Scenarios.
The world of lawlessness and the world of those who probably are prone to obeying laws. So when you have a lawless situation, when you know that your people are of this kind, then you can go what is generally seen as the Machiavellian way. Otherwise, the man equally believes that for people who are sane, who have the spirit and understanding of law and order, there are better ways to deal with them.
And unfortunately, Doctor, people forget that he was trying to solve the political situation of the time.
At that time, we need to.
So we copy concepts without understanding the temperament.
That same scenario is playing out now.
Yeah. But it's really interesting. I like reading Machiavelli. Let's move to the Vanguard newspaper now. Militants battle Ondo government over non-inclusion in amnesty program. Issue 21-day ultimatum. Say riverine parts will be no-go areas during 2019 polls. Threaten Ondo, Lagos, Ogun, riverine communities. Oh, wow. I wonder if we have to hear about militants not included in amnesty program at this time.
I've always believed that this amnesty program is not a solution to the problems of the area. And as a matter of fact, for me, amnesty suggests that you should go violent, because it is only those who seem to have exercised some level of violence that have been captured in this so-called amnesty deal. And it has equally become a kind of, you know, a means of livelihood to some who are now, you know, affiliating with militancy. Militants. Now, what is this? Why were this, you know, why was this militancy all over the area? I think those are the things we should look at, not the militants themselves alone. The militants per se were not fighting that their own personal compounds were taken or lands were taken. It is the entire area. So how come specific persons are the ones that are not captured in the name of, you know, amnesty program?
Yeah.
So why not look at the general picture of what they were actually fighting?
Yeah, but on the other hand, one would say the amnesty window was open. These people, where were they at the time that the window was open? And if they were excluded at that time, why didn't they raise alarm? Why now? No, these are some of the questions other people will ask.
When it comes to amnesty and militancy, militants are always emerging. All right? This program we are talking about perhaps was not the initial program. Maybe it's a continual, you know, the continuous amnesty issue. Perhaps this is another generation of, and you will always
find, if you look at the Niger Delta too, after the exit of Tom Ateke, Tom Polo, and the rest of them, other ones emerged again.
They will always emerge because of the way and manner this thing is being, you know, executed. You need to, you know, give the area a holistic approach. You address those issues that were raised, but when it becomes an issue of specific militants,
and I think the government, on the other hand, has to look for a way of winding down the amnesty program. But that's
we don't need amnesty program. What we need is the general development of the area. Addressing
I think amnesty program is a temporal.
Temporal, and it's almost running across several governments or regimes. Or
let's run through now. I jog more than a mile regularly, but won't seek votes based on that. Atiku is, in a subtle way, replying to, you know, when they said that the president walked 800 meters, so he's fit for 2019 election. All right.
That shouldn't be an issue at all. As a matter of fact, the man is a military man, though retired, but is in the blood. I expect that walking 800 meters should not be an issue, really.
Okay.
It shouldn't be an issue.
All right, let's move on now. IFLS Music House. A physical challenge not excuse to break law. Jimobi, the governor, is saying that, well, we've been following this development from Ibadan. All right, global community back Buhari's second-term bid, says a foreign minister. And third mainland bridge, federal government, Lagos government deploy personnel to alternative routes today, because from midnight today, the third mainland bridge will be closed. Oil price leaps to $74 per barrel as U.S. inventory drops. Okay, and those are some of the stories here.
All right, this day newspaper, in a show of confidence, Saraki predicts victory for PDP in 2019 as old and new members to unite.
Well, we are here, we are watching. It will be a very pleasant role to see that PDP is able to stage such a comeback and to take over the reins of government. We are watching, but it's not going to be an easy task. It's a very tall order for PDP to do that, because looking at the voting terrain and the way and manner of votes coming, well, let's look at that.
All right, airlines domestic passengers dropped by 30%, and they are saying the slowdown is due to economic activities.
Well, I think that truly, although we've always had this ease of doing business and all the other things, but there seems not to be any remarkable, progress of that kind in terms of per capita income and what have you. Practically everything. If the standard of living has not moved any bit higher, so I'm beginning to wonder really that are we really, in this particular mood as it has been, described, that we would not have ease of doing business. I expect that, okay, even if you have the ease of doing business, is business equally thriving? Well, that's another aspect of it we need to look at, because if that is the case, why should there be a decline? Because transportation is part of the business.
Of course.
And air movement or flights and what have you are part of, those things that you equally use as, those things you use in measuring whether there is actually
parameters.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. Let's now look at another story. SAGE, federal government can invoke doctrine of necessity to fund 2019 elections. There is a sense in which people are beginning to, when Kemi Adeosun's certificate, issue came out the other time, SAGE was reported to have made a comment. I don't know if you came across it, where he said that they didn't need to bother about, her certificate.
Why was Salisu Buhari removed? Wasn't there a certificate?
Exactly. the first Speaker of the House of Reps in the Fourth Republic.
Yes. So why was he removed? It wasn't an issue of certificate.
So now he's saying federal government can invoke doctrine of necessity to fund 2019 elections.
Maybe there's such a doctrine of necessity as well to abandon certificates. And the rest of it. You see,
High Chief.
The way these laws are interpreted, that is why I've always told you that I have problem with this thing called law, because this war will come, and the major worry, like I've always expressed, is that law is not based on knowledge. It's not based on how much you've gone to school. It's about lordship.
Yeah, let's move to the Daily Sun now. Mieti Allah storm over threat to Saraki. A herders group disown officials' call for Senate President's resignation. They should be arrested, tried for treason. PDP saying that. We remember one of the leaders of Mieti Allah telling Saraki that he has to resign or be forced out of office.
So what is the Senate about cattle rearing, or what is it?
Well, Nigerians, although have the right to say anything, but when they make
an individual, if they are speaking as individuals, but saying Mieti Allah will never need to be a political party.
Yeah.
All right, except they've registered one. But if not, whoever is speaking should not be on behalf of Mieti Allah. Speak as an individual that this is your position. You feel Saraki. But
exactly.
However, I don't know the basis upon which such a declaration is being made, because I have not seen Saraki violate any law as far as the office is concerned. It's not a fact. I remember very clearly Tambuwa did the same thing, and the heavens didn't fall. This kind of pressure was not there. It is the senators that will determine who becomes their president.
Yeah. Now, two things that has been said about this is that there is no law that says that a minority party cannot be the head of the National Assembly.
Of course.
And number two is that if you are aggrieved, go to court and let the court interpret who should be. No, but the point there, but the point there is that the laws are clear as to if you're leaving, or sorry, if you've decamped or defected to another political party, you should go back home and seek a fresh mandate.
But even just of recent, I said Tambuwa left the PDP for the APC. The APC never saw that there was a crime in that. So why is that becoming an issue?
Let's move ahead now. Edwin Clark harps on restructuring, says it's panacea to insecurity. Buhari laying foundation for greater economy. Tinubu is saying that. And angry youths set court ablaze in Imo State is really a troubling one there. And Daura Emir Tobans Kalu as Hausa ambassador. Okay, and APC resumes nationwide membership registration. All right, those are some of the headlines now. Okay.
All right, the Punch newspaper, 2019 leadership tussle threatens reps APC caucus.
So, this time around, what is it all about now? What? Who leads the APC or what? In the caucus or what is it?
The Gbajabiamila is a group led by Gbajabiamila, and there's another group, led by certain, can't remember his name now.
Is it Ndume or
what? No, not Ndume.
Ndume is in the Senate.
Yeah, let me see. Okay, Serikin Ada, Musa Serikin Ada. That's the name.
Well, leadership, there's always, issues of this kind. So as far as humans are concerned, somebody will always want to surpass the other. So I don't really see that as even if there is such, a shake-up in the APC, I don't think it will constitute any threat to the nation. So let them continue politicking.
All right. Nigerians want competent president, not Walker. That's coming from the PDP chairman, Secondos.
Yeah, how do we measure this competence now? How do we
I guess it's a discretionary
so
measure there.
They've not set out any form of parameters that, okay, A competent president should have this or have that.
All right.
Okay, the Daily Trust is the next paper now. National Assembly to interrupt recess for election budget. So maybe at long last, they might cut short the recess and consider the budget for INEC.
I think that is actually important. It is important that for now it's necessary. But however, presidents should be careful about things of this kind, because there's no point doing what is avoidable, creating a scenario of this kind, because it wasn't too long ago a budget was sent. All of this should be factored into it. I don't think this should be something that should come up again.
And the G3 is that if the House reconvenes now, there might be moves for the call for the impeachment of the Senate President.
But that should not be a case of fear. You shouldn't call for fear. if they have the requisite number to do that, let them go ahead. Saraki was not born a senator, let alone a Senate President. So,
exactly.
Let them
All right, let's look at other headlines. Governors delay new minimum wage. Ngige saying that, and stock investors lose 2 trillion naira in 7 months. And Tinubu, we need Buhari to re-engineer economy, and Saraki, PDP will win 2019 presidential election. Okay, so some of the headlines on the Daily Trust.
All right, the New Telegraph. It's impossible for Buhari to lose 2019 re-election. So it's all part of the politicking. PDP saying they are going to win, and APC.
Nothing is impossible.
Yes.
It's possible for him to win. It's equally possible for him to lose. So. How
it was just like in 2015.
Yeah,
no one knew how it was going to go.
The possibilities are everywhere.
It's all in the hand of Nigeria. That's just the thing.
Let's not be too sacrosanct on that, as if.
Okay. All right. Christian Association of Nigeria says Nigeria's security situation is unacceptable. Restructuring will solve the nation's insecurity. That's coming from Clark, Edwin Clark.
Okay.
All right.
Except that this restructuring has not been clearly defined. So some quarters it creates jitters. You find people who are jittery about what this restructuring is about. However, on daily basis we restructure things. So I think we should really begin to define what it is.
Well, the point there is, in all, everyone has come to say that when it comes to any kind of restructuring, the unity of Nigeria is sacrosanct.
It's not sacrosanct.
That is
negotiable.
That is negotiable. You say it's not negotiable.
Everything is negotiable. Let's leave all those stories. It's negotiable.
All right, Dr. Daniel Kere, thank you so much for coming on the program.
What apparently is a big issue, the closing down, a temporary closure of the third mainland bridge. Now, the third mainland bridge would be temporarily shut down for 3 days, starting from midnight of August 23rd, that's today, to midnight of Sunday, August 26th. Now, the reason is to carry out investigative maintenance tests.
All right, now the 3-day closure, according to the Lagos State Commissioner for Works and Infrastructure, is to enable contractors assess the true state of the bridge, after which works will commence by the end of the year or early 2019 and last for about 27 months. Now, the federal government had earlier announced plans to shut the bridge in July, but the decision was put on hold after consultation with stakeholders.
Well, of course, we still have in the studio here Dr. Dana Kere of the Philosophy Department, UNILAG, and Director, Highway, Bridges and Design, Federal Ministry of Works, Engineer Tokumbo Shogbeson. Thank you very much indeed for coming.
Welcome, gentlemen.
All right, let me start with you, Engineer Tokumbo. When we say investigative, checks, what are we talking about? What do we mean? What are the sort of things you want to look at?
Thank you very much. Actually, the investigative test entails deflection tests on expansion joints, which is why we are shutting the bridge. Entails checking the pile cap and the piles underwater to know which piles is failing, which one is still standing, checking the brakes on the parapets and railings. It's just to check the integrity of the whole bridge, to know the state the bridge is. Like I said when I was there 2 days ago, that the bridge is almost 30 years old. It was commissioned in 1990. And you may recall that the portion between Ebutemeta and then Ijadele was opened 6 years earlier. So it needs tests, comprehensive investigative tests now to know what kind of maintenance to carry out now.
Okay. Well, Dr. Ekere, we know that people will be a little apprehensive because when you talk about the third mainland bridge, it is very central to movements in Lagos, and it is going to be shut down, even though they talk about alternative routes, but then people are still apprehensive.
Yeah, to be very candid, once you mention the closure of the third mainland bridge, it's as good as saying that you want to shut down businesses on the island, as far as the Lagosians are concerned. But thank God it's going to be, midnight today. And we may likely have the challenge for, say, Friday. Saturday, ordinarily, we do expect that there will be much, so-called work, whatever. Sunday equally. So, yes. But my concern, too, is that are we saying that we are carrying out this test for the first time? Because if so, how come there's this projection of, 27 months or thereabout? I want to believe that this is something they perhaps have done over time. Maybe you want to take the final, investigation or check to know what you can now say is the true situation. Because without that, it will be difficult for you to just project that, by 2019 or thereabout, you are going to shut down for so long a period to carry out, repairs. And now, truly, if you've been on that bridge in recent time, you will notice that, yeah, you could notice that there are little challenges of this undulating, topography there, or you find it somehow,
the level of the bridge.
Yes. So, and again, those, what you call them now, those, spots where different parts of the bridge are brought together, you notice some look like they are shifting slightly, When you ply that place, you'll be hearing the vibration of your car, in a manner that would suggest that there's something wrong. So, obviously, there's something wrong, but we are wishing that it shouldn't be the third mainland bridge alone. This idea of maintenance, this culture of maintenance is something that we must embrace, because without that, we might have, I pray we don't get to a situation where we have the scenario that took place in Italy, recently, because Nigerians on that bridge, for some people, is a home, apart from those who are on top. For others, even as we speak, there are tanker drivers who have turned the other bridges to
shelter for them?
Fine. Some, they've turned it to a very decent, what you can call mansion, where they have kitchens, they have sitting room, they have toilets under the bridges. So we need to, whatever this, we have to be very careful about it, really.
All right, engineer. As one who's been as a structural, I would be right to call you a structural engineer. How often do you think that we need to carry out maintenance repairs like this one? How often of infrastructure like that?
Well, thank you. What we're doing now is investigative tests, which normally we should be doing every 5 years on the bridges. No, there's routine maintenance, which is normal, like painting the parapets, replacing handrails.
And some of the parapets have broken as you travel along.
Yes, I know.
Yes.
So we're repairing those now, the broken ones too.
Yeah, okay.
But the normal investigative test should be every 3 years. And specifically on Third Mainland Bridge, the last investigative test was in 2008, 10 years ago. Wow. So we cannot depend on the results. That's why we're taking this now.
So different from what was done in 2012. 2012 were repaired, isn't it?
Thank you very much. In 2008, we did investigative test that the bridge was closed for 3 days. That necessitated us to work towards the end of the year in 2008 to repair about few expansion joints. Okay. Based on that result, another maintenance was carried out in 2012. But ever since 2000, we have not done any investigative test on that. That's why we're taking it now. And I pray, and hopefully, there might be another one in the next 5 years to just know the state and integrity of the bridge.
Okay, let me stay with you before I come to Dr. Ekere. Now, when days are set for this kind of either investigation or the main maintenance of the bridge, how do you determine exactly how many days it should take?
Well, because from experience, because basically we are doing investigative tests on expansion joints. And between Oworonshoki and the Butemeta Junction, we are doing about, on each line, about 5 tests, which we might conclude that one in 6-7 hours. But from Butemeta to Adeniji-Adele end, as we have to do all, because we have the maintenance we did in 2008, 2012, the expansion joint repair them were on Oworonshoki to Butemeta. Okay. So now the more emphasis now will be on Butemeta to Adeniji-Adele section. Okay. And we hope that, because that one is only about 3 kilometers, we are from Oworonshoki end to Butemeta is about 6.1 kilometers. The total length of the bridge, top mainland bridge, is about 11.8 kilometers, yeah, which is the second longest bridge in Africa. Yeah. It used to be the longest before the 6th October in
Cairo.
The Cairo Bridge. Yeah.
Okay. All right, Dr. Dan. Well, if you look at the situation at the moment, of course, the state government and all those concerned have talked about taking alternative routes. Yeah. But again, there are still concerns. Safety on these alternative routes. For instance, I asked this question yesterday, but I would like to hear from you as well. Those within water regions, for instance, those in the Ikorodu axis, who would like to travel by water. Not too long ago, we had a disaster there. So people are a bit still worried about the safety of the waterways.
Yeah, thank you. I think that we've not really made it much a tradition here in Lagos. Otherwise, for me, crossing from Ikorodu to the island, that would have been the fastest, way.
Yes.
And it would have equally been the most pleasurable kind of ride, because the way the, what do you call them now, the boats are designed, that is, if you get the right ones, they give some level of comfort. And it ordinarily would have been a pleasure ride. But do we abide by, the rules? A boat that is supposed to carry 10 persons, sometimes you carry 20. This idea of making fast money and all of that, without adhering to those rules. Somebody has manufactured a vessel or has designed a boat, and he's saying that this is the maximum weight it can carry. You who has no idea about the design or anything, you are saying that no, you can't carry only that one. I can even multiply the number. That is the attitude we have, and number of times,
even on the roads,
So it's not just the waterways that are not safe. Every day accidents happen on the road. Yet we supply the road. So I think that the government should actually look into that area a little more. Hopefully we believe that the rail will come on stream and. It will reduce all of this. But then the waterways equally, before we now think of maybe bringing the Fort Mainland to life, the waterways need to be properly taken care of so that it can reduce the pressure on a lot of people. I can imagine, I had a friend who worked on the island, Lekki area, and he lived on Ikorodu. He was a 12 to 12 worker. He leaves the house so early and he comes very late just because of this fear of traffic. So if we had made that provision such that people can conveniently and confidently move from Ikorodu to the island by boat, I'm telling you, this traffic situation will not be as chaotic as it is. So I think the government needs to look into it.
All right. Engineer Shogweson, the rains are here, and certainly I wonder what impact the rains will have on this investigative checks, and is it likely that somehow the dates can be extended?
Well, actually we were on NIMET's website yesterday because we are monitoring rains and the likelihood of rain on Friday. But we're praying that in the afternoon we won't have the rain. Somebody was even joking with me this morning that I should get a rainmaker to shift the rain to midnight. We are believing that, everything on our side, we will conclude within the 3 days. Of course, rain might affect if it's in the afternoon, but if it's at night, we can manage. We hope that there won't be any extension, because I know closing Tomela Bridge on a Monday morning.
Wow.
Very chaotic.
I'm telling you.
So we're going to do all within our powers to make sure that we conclude by midnight Sunday so that the bridge can be open to traffic Monday morning. Then let me encourage Lagosians. Apart from inland waters, I want to encourage people that live in Ikorodu, Surulere and stuff to do what we call carpooling. I grew up in Lawansin, in Surulere. If somebody lives in Lawansin and you have friends that live in a, probably maybe Ajao, Ogulano Drive, or Adeno Ogusoya, you can pick your car, pick this your friends, and instead of 4 cars being on the road, only one will be on the road. That will call carpooling. At least for that Friday, to reduce the volume of traffic on the road. And of course, if you can't do carpooling, or as many that can do carpooling, people can use the buses just for that Friday, because I know Friday is only the most critical day. So I'm appealing to Lagosians, do carpooling and go on mass transit. That will really,
would you be working night and day throughout the 3 days?
Yeah, hopefully, yeah. We might be working night and day because we want to take. That's why we hope that we will extend. We'll do all within ourselves, within our powers, with the contractor to make sure, because the engineers coming for the investigation are coming from Italy. And we don't want to keep them extra days because of cost. So we work mobilize all within ourselves to make sure it ends midnight Sunday.
All right, let me stay with you. After the test, because you mentioned earlier that usually after investigative tests are done, it will take you about 3 to 5 years or so before you do the repairs.
No, not repairs.
Another test.
Another test. Yeah, but once this is done, what next after the test?
Thank you very much. Actually, after the test, we will now go to the main repair works of the bridge.
Okay. But it is immediately?
No, because most of the expansion joints will be imported. Most of these things are not in Nigeria. They'll be imported. Epoxy, even for grouting the piers that are spoiled concrete, has to be imported from abroad. And in fact, we're even liaising with Airport Authority Customs so that when they come in, there won't be delay. So that's why we said the repair works might start towards the end of the year or early 2018. 2019, sorry. Thank you very much. And let me emphasize this. When we start the repair works, we're not going to shut the old bridge. We only shut the sections we are working. The other section will be in use.
So traffic will still be allowed to flow?
Yes, and there will be demarcation for both directions on the second carriageway that's not being worked on. So once it's only this test that will take time. After this, the stress on the Lagosians will be minimized. Thank you.
Okay, Dr. Kere, we know that with the closure of the third mainland bridge now, the Kata Bridge and the Eko Bridge will be the next. How, in your mind, how Herculean do you think it's going to be? Because Engineer Shokweso was saying that at least people should try to, exactly. But talk to us about that. What do you imagine?
I'm even saying that even with the third mainland opened, traffic situation in Lagos is still chaotic. So you can imagine what, in fact, you can't fully imagine, what is going to happen. But then, I think Lagosians can actually strike a chord. We can begin to understand ourselves better. Well, first is that the government must deploy traffic, officers to the routes that will be available. Because a lot of times, it is irresponsible driving that causes, the chaotic situation. Impatience and all the rest. So if we have those officers on ground to, maintain some level of, checks.
And coordination.
Yeah, coordination. Then you find out that there will be, a smooth flow of traffic. It could be slow, but then it will still be flowing. But at the same time, too, we equally need to, you see, because sometimes, too, you find that a lot of these vehicles on the roads, as a matter of fact, are not supposed to be on the roads. Because you find vehicles that you are so sure that in the next 2 minutes is going to, pack up and
or break down.
Yeah, or break down. Such vehicles, you find them on the roads as well. And again, this idea of, because sometimes you just find people who truly have nothing doing there, So when you look at all the, factors, then you have to apply some kind of sense of cooperation so that the situation will not be as terrible as some might be, be imagining now, so that at least for that day alone, they'll be able to do that. But again, on the part of the engineers, we're equally hoping that they should do everything within their power to ensure that within the time frame, all that is needed is done. Because like he mentioned, on a Monday morning, shutting down the third mainland bridge, it's not going to be an easy task. It's not going to be an easy task at all.
All right, with the sort of pressure and with how long that this bridge has stayed as well, close to 30 years now, 28, as a matter of fact, a fourth, fifth, sixth bridges would be needed. As a matter of fact, there were plans to start the fourth mainland bridge, which would cost about 844 billion naira or thereabout. But unfortunately, they put a stop, they put a hold on it and all of that. So we do need more bridges.
Certainly, there's no two ways about that. In Lagos in particular, we need more bridges. And I know in other places, but Lagos, see, there has been this clamor for a special status for Lagos. Even though I don't understand the concept of a special status, but I do understand that Nigeria as a state has a lot to do with Lagos. So, apart from being the former, capital, it is still the economic capital of the country. There's practically no interest that is not represented in Lagos. And the government has a lot to benefit from Lagos. So I expect that some special attention, I'm not necessarily clamoring for special status, but at least some special attention should be given to Lagos, so that both the federal government, the Lagos state government, and the private sector come together, initiate this, fourth mainland bridge we are looking at. We should have more than fourth. And at the same time, too, a rail from Ikorodu to the island is equally very critical. Not just about buses now, because these bridges we are talking about, we're only looking at vehicles. Now, we need a rail across, such that, because you know that with a rail line, the traffic is going to reduce, because we know the volume of, the number of persons that the rail can take care of. At the time you have that, there will equally be a reduced pressure on the bridges and all the other roads, because much of what we experience is a function of people, try to cross the water, either by boat or by vehicle. So at the time you bring in the rail, just like the government is trying from the Badagry axis to the island, I'm sure that a lot of these problems will be drastically reduced. So it is critical.
So some analysts have even said that the fourth and fifth mainland bridges should take off even at the same time. There's no point doing one and then waiting for another 30 years to do another one.
That would have been the best way to go, but the issue of funds.
Exactly. Well, Engineer Shogweson, this question arose, and even we were talking about this sometime. The third mainland bridge has become a place for people to commit suicide. And people just park their cars, jump into the lagoon, or just, stop a taxi and then jump into the lagoons. It brings us to the issue of the barricade on the third mainland bridge. I asked you 2 days ago when you were here, and the other engineer, and he said, well, the barricades are adequate. But when it is so low enough for anybody to jump easily, is there anything that can be done in that regard?
Thank you very much, Mike. Ideally, what we have now is the international standard, 0.6 and drill about 0.3 meters, that's about 0.9 meters. To start increasing it because of suicide for 11.8 kilometers, the cost is enormous. So I feel that as a prelude to that, probably there should be a helicopter monitoring the bridge, because people commit suicide anywhere.
Yes,
although we know that is
sorry, sir, but when you compare cost and human life, when you compare cost and human life, I mean, how do you put the balance? Isn't it better? Isn't it better to look at human lives than compare costs?
Well, probably we'll give it a thought, but The cost alone, because when I was there 2 days ago, he asked a question about cost of maintenance. Yes. Thank God my brother mentioned the cost of Fourth Mainland Bridge.
Because
that will be 800 billion.
Yeah.
He said something last 2 days ago that when Third Mainland Bridge was constructed in 1990, it was below 1 billion. And I couldn't react to it. Let me just say this. We know the cost of Fourth Mainland Bridge. When the bridge was commissioned, dollar to naira was 70. What 70 kobo was a dollar? 1990. Petrol sells for 70 kobo. And naira to dollar, 7.6 naira was a dollar. You can imagine the cost now. Even because most of these materials needed for bridge are imported. They are not made locally. Because when I mentioned that the cost about 18.2, it felt
18 billion naira.
18 billion.
Exactly. Because you know Nigerians are very
to
used
construct that bridge now will cost nothing less than 900 billion.
Yes, engineer,
but the point there is the longest bridge in the world is in China, as the case may be. And when you check the cost of constructing a bridge like that, it's way cheaper than constructing a bridge like that in Nigeria.
Thank you very much.
So what makes them different?
Let me tell you, what makes the difference is the foreign exchange. In China, most of the products they use are made in China. But in Nigeria, we have to import everything.
From China and the rest.
Yeah, from China, from America, from Italy. That maybe this will be a challenge to our engineers to start fabricating some of these materials locally. We have done it in petroleum, local content in petroleum industry. Yeah. We need to extend it to bridges. Even bitumen are imported to Nigeria.
And we have
bitumen in Ondo from record.
We have a lot of it.
We have bitumen.
Untapped.
So that would be a challenge to Nigerian engineers. We need to go in and start producing some of these things so that cost of building roads, housing will come down.
Yeah, but even in the area of the challenge to Nigerian engineers you talked about, Third Mainland Bridge, I know that there are so many engineers like you and others who have all it takes to maintain the bridge. Yes. But you are bringing in engineers from Italy and other parts of the world.
You know, I explained this 2 days ago. We awarded that project to Bronipono because they were part of the company's consortium that constructed the bridge in 1990.
Okay.
And you know, because we don't keep records, they have made drawing. I don't know if they can find it in the ministry. That's why we decided to give it to, because they know the history. What we need to start doing now is because the local content.
Or so?
Yes.
Did they work in conjunction with Julius Berger?
No. I explained the last 2 days ago. The Adenija delay to Ebute. Remember that Adenija delay to after Ebute was constructed and commissioned around 1982-83. That Ebute was abandoned for years.
Yes.
It was Lagos State government then and the federal that came to construct that section. And it was given to a consortium of PGH. And that Prono that constructed that stretch.
Okay.
Are you getting my point? I hope that one plays the question.
All right, we have to leave you here now, Engineer. All right, Engineer Tokunbo Shogbeson, Director, Highway, Bridges and Designs, Federal Ministry of Works, and Dr. Dan Ekere of the University of Lagos. My directors are saying we have to keep you still. We're not through with this yet because Nigerians want to know more about the bridge. The Third Mainland Bridge, officially called the Ibrahim Babangida Bridge, is the second longest bridge in Africa.
But nobody calls it by that name anymore.
Yeah, no one calls it by the... In fact, not so many people know the name by that. They call it the Third Mainland Bridge. Then the first mainland bridge in Lagos is the Eko Bridge. The second is the Carrington Bridge, and the Kata Bridge. Kata Bridge. And then the third one is the Ibrahim Babangida Bridge. Now they're looking at the fourth mainland bridge to be constructed if the funds are available. All right, we have with us in the studio Engineer Tokunbo Shogbeson. He's Director, Highways, Bridges and Designs, Federal Ministry of Works. He's been doing justice to making us understand the bridge better and other bridges in Nigeria. And we have also from the Department of Philosophy, University of Lagos, Dr. Dan Ekere, who've been looking at these issues in here. Now, Engineer Shogbeson, let me come to you on this. Before we went on break, you were talking about the possibility of keeping an eye on the bridge. And you talked about the issue of the possibility of helicopters. And fueling helicopters to maintain or to look at or keep an eye on the bridge is going to be cost effective too. So Nigerians would like to know how feasible that could be.
Thank you very much. Apparently, from what we have discussed, what we're going to do when I get back to Abuja, we'll try to see the cost of raising the railings by about a meter and compare it like a cost comparison to maintaining a helicopter to monitor.
All right.
You know, you agree with me that people jump into lagoon from Tomeland Bridge because of the length. You hardly see it on Eko Bridge or Kata Bridge because there are a lot of pedestrians. If you want to jump, people will hold you. You know, we are brothers keepers in Nigeria. So we'll look at the costs and see which will be more effective. We'll call the contractors in to give us costs of 11 kilometers of the road on both sides, both carriageway, and compare it to running helicopter. But basically, we will do something concerning because it's a concern to Nigerians generally. All right. And it's because the bridge is not, we don't have many pedestrians on it because of the length. The length. People cannot walk almost 11 kilometers.
But we have the police stationed from intervals on the bridge sometimes.
Yes, probably we'll look at all together. We will work with Lagos State government, Lagos State Ministry of Works and Infrastructure to see the best option, either to patrol with cars or helicopter or raising the fence, so that we'll do a sort of cost analysis and go with the most economical.
Which one is preferred. All right, effective. Dr. Dan, here is something else I like us to talk about. You know, the country is going through unemployment. The rate is pretty high at the moment. So many of the youths do not have jobs, getting engaged in ritual activities. Of course, a few days ago you saw a young man who hit his mother with stuff and wanted to kill her for ritual purpose. Now I'm talking about engagement of Nigerian engineers, because when you engage them, the ripple, the chain effect would be that there would be employment for the public. So in instances like this, why do you think we're not getting our own engineers involved? Because as you said, they are contracting people from the outside.
Well, thank you. I think that is worrisome in itself, but then we have to be very careful that there are certain areas that demand, high skills, and I do not think that the entire workforce will come from Italy or somewhere else. But those specific areas, and in this particular instance, he is even saying that some of these people were part of the project as at the time it was done, so they should have a better understanding of what it is. Now, but on the issue of engaging our engineers, I think it doesn't call for any debate. We must factor in this, local content. Yeah, it's very critical because a number of times employers will want to ask for 5-10 years of experience. Now, but I am very, very aware that you don't get the experience from the classrooms. Yep. So if you don't ever engage them, at what point will they ever have the experience? So that is a very great challenge to, employment and the question of unemployment. For as long as employers are only interested in experienced hands and they don't want to ever open the gates for people to have that experience, then perhaps you will only get the kind of, personnel you need from some of those, countries where you have the experience. And I think that augurs well for us. So we need to factor in this issue of local content and engage our own engineers. From there on the job, they'll be gaining experience. And again, that environment should be created in such a way that people can begin to even bring to bear whatever they have studied to practical reality. Because sometimes some of these things you are importing are things that we are capable of doing, but the environment is not fertile for it. Look at the bitumen deposits we have. Nobody is exploring it. Nothing is happening, and you are importing. Perhaps if we had concentrated some efforts in wanting to, maybe do something about that, you begin to gain the on-the-job experience.
So there is a sense in which government is culpable in that they are not creating the environment to let the
certainly, that one is very clear, because as we speak, power is still a challenge. Even those who have what it takes to want to get involved in any form of experimentation and the rest, those things that could aid them are not there. So how do you expect people to, to garner this experience without ever working? All right,
Engineer Shogbeson, we haven't heard much about the closure of Eko Bridge or Kata Bridge, but we've heard often of Third Mainland Bridge. What's the difference? There are bridges leading here and there. So what's the difference?
Mike, thank you very much. That's a very good question. You may wish to recall that in 2008, 2009, Eko Bridge was closed because we changed all the expansion joints. Even Lagos State government paid for it.
Okay.
And Kata Bridge design, we're closing, let me say this so that you understand properly. The third mainland bridge are 2 carriageways, but they are composite structure because they are joined at the middle. The surface duct is at the middle, and that's why we're closing it, because when you do vibration test on the expansion joint and the vehicles on the other side, it affects the vibration. You recall that there is a limit of vibration of bridges.
Yes.
But there's a limit to it. Eco bridge carriageways are not joined, they're not composites. So that's why when we want to do investigative tests in Eco bridge, we don't need to close it. We only close the section we want to investigate. Okay. That's the basic difference. Right. But the third mainland bridge is like a composite structure that houses the service ducts. And if you are doing vibration tests on a particular lane, and vehicles even stand still, cause a lot of vibration, which affects your reading. That's just the basic difference. Okay. Then let me address something on this local content. In Federal Ministry of Power Works and Housing now, if you give I don't know what to call them, a foreign company, because Julius Berger is Julius Berger Nigeria Limited. Julius Berger has a Nigerian chairman. But probably what we should say is 100% owned company, Nigerian owned company. But even as it is, even most of these so-called foreign companies, Julius Berger, Brony Prono, there's a local content law now that the number of engineers employed, at least 50, 60 men must be Nigerians. All the unskilled labor must be Nigerians. Okay. You can't bring a laborer from Italy or from Germany to come and work here. No, we don't allow it again. All the unskilled, carpenter, masons, are all Nigerians. Okay. And then the skilled percentage must be Nigerians. So that we can gather experience. And the only thing we need to do now is to start patronizing the Nigerian-owned company so that we can start giving them jobs to take off. But no, I know we'll get there.
Okay. Well, we'll get there. We'll look forward to Nigerian companies or Nigerian construction companies being able to handle very complex and sophisticated bridges, even more, better than
I want to believe we can, if only we have the equipment. He is a Nigerian, all right? And if he has no understanding of what he's discussing, he would, the fact that he could even discuss it with such understanding means that he can do something in that direction. But then, does he have the environment to get it done in that manner? So if the facilities are there, the equipment and all the rest, I am very convinced.
The funding.
Yeah, because why we call Italian engineers here expatriates, Nigerian engineers abroad, the same thing will be, because we have them all over. They are there.
Exactly.
Just like medical doctors, you have them all over the world. So it's a question of actually pulling the resources together and establishing that kind of platform that will bring them on board.
All right, we have to leave you here now. Dr. Dane Kere of the University of Lagos, thank you so much for coming on the program.
Thank you so much.
Engineer Tokunbo Shogbesan, Director, Highway and Bridges and Designs, Federal Ministry of Works, thank you very much for coming as well.
Thank you for having
me. We
me.
wish you well. We know that this time is going to be very busy for you.
Very busy. Thank
All
you
right,
very
thank
much
you so much. Thank you. Looters of the nation's treasury will be jailed. That's the promise President Muhammadu Buhari made on his arrival from his 10-day vacation from the United Kingdom a few days ago.
Yeah, that's correct. His anti-corruption fight has yielded good fruits over the years amid criticisms that it is selective. But this administration is no backing down anytime soon. Let's now bring in Inibehe Effiong, a constitutional lawyer. He is here in the studios with us, and also Desmond Ojo, a politician. He is also an architect and a businessman. Thank you very much indeed for coming, gentlemen.
Thank you. Nice to see you, gentlemen.
All right, let me start with you, Inibehe. PDP, through its publicity secretary, Logbodeo, and the OBJ group are saying to the president that, look, you need to begin with APC members to demonstrate integrity on your part. Is there a sense in which that resonates with you?
The president is not in a position to jail anybody for looting the resources of the country. My construction or interpretation of what the president said is that the administration is forging ahead with the fight against corruption, and that within the purview of his constitutional powers as the chief executive of the federation and the head of the executive, under which agencies saddled with the responsibility of fighting corruption like EFCC and ICPC function, is that he will ensure that the fight against corruption is fought. I believe the president is aware that only a court can make a pronouncement of guilt. That is the preliminary point. When PDP says the president should start with members of the APC to demonstrate that he's genuinely fighting corruption, I am very careful to respond to that. The president need not start with members of the ruling party. What the advocacy should be centered on is that the fight should not be partisan. Because if you now say the president should focus on members of the APC, you are invariably saying the president should fight members of the APC.
No, they are saying...
Let us have it both ways.
They are saying, look, there are members within the party who also have alleged criminal records. That, look, you also need to begin to fight them as well.
I agree.
Because it does appear that it is selective. That's the general, conception.
No, that opinion is not personal to the PDP. Other Nigerians and other interest groups have also raised concerns on the neutrality of the fight against corruption. Namely, that there are even persons in the current government who are facing grave allegations pertaining to corruption, pertaining to criminal infraction. But it does appear that those persons are one way or the other being protected by the current government. We Nigerians are conversant with the case of the sacked SGF, the grass cutter in quotes, who despite being indicted by a panel headed by the Vice President of Nigeria, is yet to be arraigned in courts. There are also allegations involving the Chief of Staff to the President, who is alleged, I use that word alleged carefully, to have been involved in 500 million naira bribery with MTN. There are other allegations involving other members of the government, including allegations of forgery, which is as serious as that. So some Nigerians are genuinely agitated that how come that a government that is fighting corruption has not done anything about these cases. This is important because in the fight against corruption, perception is everything. Once there is that perception that the fight is partisan, that the fight is determined by who is involved, it affects the credibility of the war itself.
Right.
So without lending my voice necessarily to the advocacy of the PDP, being a party that is also immersed in corruption, being a party that was rejected in 2015 because of corruption, being a party that does not have the moral right to lecture Nigerians on corruption, I speak independently to say that indeed there is need for the fight to be spread across board.
All right. Let me bring it to Desmond now. In 2015, when the president was coming in, fighting corruption was one of the 3 cardinal points or promises he made, besides the issue of the economy and security. Now, 3 years down the line, Nigerians, from the way Inibehe was saying earlier on, not so many Nigerians see the fight against corruption as very conclusive, as very frontal, as very broad, as the case may be. But when the president got back from vacation, he reiterated his fight against corruption. How does that sit with you? Is it saying the obvious, or does that rekindle the hope of the fight against corruption with you, or you feel he's just saying, or is something political?
Yeah, my opinion is that when the president came in the last time, he was quoted out of context. Okay. The president was saying his mind, but not as a judge or a lawyer. As the president of the country, he has a responsibility to direct all the agencies to do what is right, because he holds us the mandate to do that. And in the last 3 years, the president has done well. This government has done well in fighting corruption. If you can recollect, recently, back in July, the UK government is opening up a list of foreign people who has properties in their country, and the president has done a lot in the sense of recovering the Abacha loots as well. Also, the president has done well by empowering EFCC and ICPC to do their functions. But one feature that we need to remind the government is that there's need for speedy prosecution. What do I mean by that? There was this clamoring for a special court for looters. You know, if you have that, then it will be speedy, because back in the line before 2015, between 1999 and 2015, there's been some corruption cases that are still pending in court. I'm not a lawyer, but my learned colleague can talk about that. You go from High Court to Appeal Court to Supreme Court. All those delay the court processes. I believe if the government can have a special court for prosecution of these looters, that will help in speedy delivery of judgment. And again, in the last 3 years as well, you can hear the case of some former governors who were being prosecuted and the judgment was delivered. You know, so the president, and we've not had this in the last, I must tell you, in the last 18 years of democracy. So I think this government has done a lot in fighting corruption. But a lot of people, they misconceive the president. When the president talks, he talks from his mind. And all he needs to do is to give directives to the necessary agencies like the EFCC, like the ICPC to perform their functions. And another thing is to enlighten our people, our political office holders, to make sure that they do what is right at all times. If you're vying for a position, then you should do your asset declaration. If you know you want to serve your people, it's only right for you to fill the necessary forms. So this is what I have, this is what I have. It's not a crime to own properties out of this country. If you are genuine, it's not a crime to have bank accounts. But I think most of these institutions need to tighten up their know your customer stuff in the bank. The foreign countries as well, they need to tighten up their corruption fight against people coming to buy properties and investing money in their country. In my view, this government has done well between 2015 and now fighting corruption.
Well, the point there is, like Inibehe said earlier, perception is key when you're talking about fighting corruption.
Yes.
And if 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 cases within this same government have been named and there hasn't been decisive or proactive a move by the president to handle them the way they're supposed to be handled, Nigerians will see it otherwise, no matter whatever the government says.
I think our lawmakers, they have a lot to do as well in sponsoring bills that will assist the government in doing this. What do I mean by that? Like I said earlier, if we have a dedicated court to file these cases, then we can conclude corruption cases in 6 months. Yeah. As to doing corruption cases for 5, 6, 7, 8 years. You know, sometimes this might be delayed tactics on the part of the accusers and the accused. You know, so if we have special courts and in these cases, then it will be a plus to the government. I think our lawmakers, they have a lot to do in this regard.
All right, Inibehe, well, I don't know if you do agree with him that the government has done well in terms of fighting corruption. He made reference, apparently one of the cases he made reference to would be Joshua Darius, sentenced to 14 years in jail. Then there was Julie Yame as well, you know, who was also sentenced. But are you convinced that the government has done very well in that respect? The other question is, there is a sense in which, you know, the president, you know, felt that the judiciary was becoming a clog in the wheel of, you know, the fight against corruption, and that resulted in the raiding of the homes of some of the judges at some point and all of that. What do you see? Do you agree with him?
I don't know what the response should be, except to say that the government has demonstrated what looks like a fight against corruption. There is no doubt about that. You cannot take it away from this government. In relative terms, one can conveniently say the Buhari regime has done better than that of his predecessors. However, the cases he cited involving former governors, the point should be made and clarified that those cases were initiated before this government came into existence. Indeed, some of those cases had been in court for about 10 years, except that judgments were given during the lifespan of this administration. However, prosecution of those cases had commenced long before this government came into existence. So in giving credit to this government, that point needs to be noted. I want to say further that the issue of the judiciary cannot be underrated. The fight against corruption does not involve only the executive. It involves the three organs of government, the legislature, the executive, and the judiciary. The president cannot, on his own, establish special courts to tackle corruption. I'm aware there has been discussion on a special crimes courts bill. This is a legislative problem, which requires the input of the National Assembly. The question is, how far has the executive gone in presenting this bill to the National Assembly? And what is the extent of lobbying? By lobbying, I don't mean giving Ghana must go. How far has the government done? What steps has the government taken to pressurize the National Assembly to pass this bill into law? And you also have other outstanding bills, like the, I think that one has even been passed, the Mutual Legal Assistance Bill, which enables the government to retrieve assets from foreign nations and all that. So I agree that all the organs of government have a role to play. Delay in cases, we can't attribute that solely to the courts, the judges. Indeed, by the enactment of the Administration of Criminal Justice Act of 2015, we no longer have what we call stay of proceedings, interlocutory appeals in criminal cases in Nigeria. We had a situation where a person is arraigned in court is not even allowed to plead to the charge. He will raise an objection to the competence of the court. He will raise an objection to the jurisdiction of the court, to the competence of the charge. The judge will have to rule on the application. It will go to the Court of Appeal. It will be fought all the way to the Supreme Court. You no longer have that. In the case of Olisametu and Federal Republic of Nigeria, the Supreme Court has said that that law, the new law is valid. We no longer have stay of proceedings. What that has done is a radical departure from the past, in that we now have cases being accelerated. Again, you also have the directive by the heads of courts that now give special attention to corruption cases through practice direction. You are aware of that currently the Federal High Court is on vacation, but you have Oju Sokalu still standing trial before Justice Idris of the Federal High Court in Lagos, because the court had to give him a fiat. The head of court had to give him a fiat to continue with that case. So this is the kind of effort the judiciary on its own is making to prioritize hearing and determination of cases relating to corruption. Okay. I want to say clearly that the president has a lot
within a good time frame.
Exactly. The president has a lot to do. Why some of us are concerned is that if you want to fight corruption, perception is everything. Not only must the president be seen to be fighting corruption, the president must clearly demonstrate that he's fighting corruption within and without. It shouldn't be a partisan thing. If people are said to have forged documents, the president should be of concern. Even before the allegation is determined, they should be in the interim suspended. You cannot have a situation where...
Step aside, let investigations commence. You cannot have a situation where
someone is accused of forging NYC certificate, nothing is being done, the president is even elevating the person, the president is traveling with the person, a former governor of my state is accused of corruption, the EFCC publicly came out to say they are still investigating Senator Godswill Akpabio, but Godswill Akpabio went to meet with Buhari in London. We cannot have this. This is about perception. Nigerians are seeing this thing to say that the president is not sincere. I agree that a lot has been done, a lot has been achieved. You have EFCC recovering about 739 billion naira within 2 years of Marco leadership. That is commendable. You have assets being recovered, you have cases being prosecuted. We are saying that
and 21 billion naira recovered through the whistleblowing policy as well.
To the credit of this government.
Yes.
You also have the treasury single account. You have the implementation of the BVN. These are executive interventions that have accelerated and enhanced the fight against corruption. The credit has to be given to the government. But we are saying that in giving that credit, we have to pay attention to details, that a lot has to be done. There are areas that the government has not covered, which Nigerians are concerned about. We cannot wish that aside. If people are serving in Buhari's government and they are accused of corruption, the first thing is to suspend them. Let the allegations be investigated. You cannot allow people who are being seriously accused of corruption. Look at even the the former DG of DSS who was removed. We read in the media that he's being investigated. What have been? I'm not hearing anything about it again. When is he going to be arraigned in court if there are charges against him? These are the issues. These are areas that Nigerians want to see the president act on.
Yes.
But the president doesn't seem to be really concerned about when his people in government are affected. That is why you have PDP crying foul and all that. But Nigerians are genuinely concerned that a lot has to be done.
Okay. All right, Desmond, EFCC and ICPC are the bodies empowered to investigate issues of corruption and possibly move towards prosecuting those who are public officials who are involved in corruption. Recently, we had the issue of the cry out from Benue State and Akwa Ibom State of EFCC freezing the accounts, or the official accounts of those states. Now, in some cases, some lawyers said the EFCC doesn't even have the right to do that. If in the eyes of the law, we have a lawyer here who will certainly clarify that. But we're seeing it from the perspective of the fact that EFCC seem to be proactive from one hand, if you see it from that window. Yeah. Then on the other hand, others will see it as being high-handed. How do we reconcile that difference? You know, in order to put things straight.
A hunt dog.
Yeah, exactly. Witch hunting. That, in fact, Benue State Governor said that that's witch hunting.
I think EFCC and ICPC, the first call will be that they have their functions are similar. So the first suggestion will be that they should be merged. I was happy when the president came in and he was like, oh, we have so many parastatals and government agencies and there will be mergers and all of that, And in the case of Benue, I think from a layman's point of view that when cases are being investigated or when states are being investigated, the first thing is to freeze the account, conduct your investigations.
Freeze the account of the state government?
Or individuals. Conduct your investigations within a limited time before you file your papers in court. And I think what EFCC done, because the timing was not right, so the states and the governor felt it was being molested because of that. And going forward, I think EFCC, like the learned lawyer said, EFCC should not be partial in investigating cases and states as well. The APC states, PDP states should be on the same level of investigation. If you notice that something is wrong with this state, if there's a fraud or if there are cases against this governor, you shouldn't be partisan about it. But in delivering these cases as well, I think the government, like he said, the president has a lot to do. He has a lot of caution to do. When it's right to talk, you talk to these agencies, do what is right, don't be partial about it. And everybody will know that the president is not partial. The government is not partial about investigating cases. But in the case of Benue, I think the account has been released after a few days of investigation, and I know that maybe after some time some people will be charged to court and all of that. But it's not peculiar to Benue. There are other PDP and APC states that are under investigation as well.
No, Akwa Ibom State is suing EFCC for about 50 billion as the case.
Yes, absolutely.
But I would like, sorry, Ike, I would like Inibehe to help us clarify this. If EFCC has the right to freeze the account of a state government, because the Attorney General of Akwa Ibom State has said that EFCC has no right whatsoever.
Yes.
Even if you are investigating, let us even assume that the governor is involved in a crime, or sorry, in corruption, whatever it is, the EFCC cannot freeze the account of a state government. Carry out your investigation and then keep your evidence until when the immunity is uncovered, when he's no longer governor, and then you can go up with the on prosecuting him. Can you help us clarify that in the eyes of the law?
My straight answer is that EFCC cannot freeze the account of a state. A state is not a person. A state is a component of the federation. Because by virtue of Section 2, subsection 2 of the Constitution, Nigeria is a federation consisting of states and the Federal Capital Territory. EFCC cannot prosecute a state. You cannot have a charge bearing parties as Federal Republic of Nigeria versus Akwa Ibom State. Who will be prosecuted? Who will be jailed? A state cannot be prosecuted. A state cannot be indicted. But officials of a state government can, in my opinion, be investigated. Accounts of a state government can be investigated because you cannot insulate accounts from officials of the government of that state. Look at the governors who were prosecuted. The charges against them relates to management of the finances of the state. So when people make the argument that the account of a state cannot be investigated, it is very strange to me. If the FCC does not prosecute a state account, which indeed is a government account, which account would they investigate? Is it private account? It is the management of that account that is investigated. But you cannot tamper with the running of the account. What you can do is to gather evidence, what we call doctrine of tracing in the law of equity. Follow the money, trace the money into where these monies are being diverted to gather the evidence for purpose of prosecution, but you cannot freeze the account of a state because the state is not a person in the eye of the law. Again, I want to make the point regarding my state, Akwa Ibom. The Attorney General may be right in law that the freezing of the account is wrong, but it's being very hypocritical because this is a state that has done everything to frustrate the FCC from investigating corruption. This is a state that has filed 2 court cases to frustrate any attempt by EFCC to investigate personnel of the state, past and present. They filed the first case before Justice Ntong in Akwa Ibom. Got an injunction restraining EFCC, restraining ICPC, restraining the Inspector General of Police, restraining all commercial banks in Nigeria from surrendering documents to EFCC, from inviting personnel of the state government, both past and present, even from the creation of the state in 1987, that nobody can be investigated. So they are being very hypocritical. When that judge was challenged by some of us, he discharged the order. You know what they did? They went to the Federal High Court, filed a similar suit before Justice Riemann of the Federal High Court in New York, seeking the same relief to say, no, we cannot be investigated. When the Supreme Court has said in the case of Attorney General of Ondo State and Attorney General of the Federation, and several other cases, that the laws establishing the anti-corruption agencies are validly made. There are also precedents of courts that EFCC can investigate any personnel of government. But this state, Akwa Ibom, you have a situation where the officials are invited by EFCC for questioning, they refuse to go. You have a situation where the Accountant General of Akwa Ibom State has declined to release documents to EFCC. You have a situation where the governor of the state has frustrated every attempt to EFCC to prosecute them.
All right.
So when they are now coming out to cry, Nigerians should not listen to them. But I agree that on the issue of law, that EFCC went too far. But to say that what the EFCC has done should be completely condemned, I will not be part of that because as an insider, I know the effort of Akwa Ibom in particular to frustrate the anti-corruption efforts of the government.
All right. These are strong issues that we certainly have to create time to look into as we get along. Inibehe Young, a lawyer, a constitutional lawyer, and human rights activist, thank you so much for coming on the program.
Thank you for having me.
And Desmond Ojo, architect and businessman, thank you very much for coming as well.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen.